Have you ever woken up at 3 in the morning with your mind racing with thoughts you can't control? Those inner voices whispering your flaws, your fears, your inadequacies? That feeling that your own mind has become a courtroom where you are simultaneously the defendant, the prosecutor, and the judge, and the verdict is always guilty. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of the day, seemingly fine, and out of nowhere, a thought pops up? You shouldn't be happy. Something bad is going to happen. And then you feel that familiar downward spiral beginning, that feeling that you're falling into a pit you dug yourself. If you're watching this video, you probably know this intimate and terrifying feeling, the feeling of being consumed from within, that your own thoughts have become your worst enemy, that there is a part of you that seems to actively work against your own happiness. Perhaps you have noticed that this does not only happen during bad times. In fact, it seems that just when things are going well, when you're feeling confident, when you're about to take an important step, that's exactly when these thoughts strike hardest. It's as if there were an underground current of darkness running beneath everything you do. A fatigue that doesn't come from the body, but from the soul. An exhaustion that doesn't improve with rest, because it comes from a constant battle against yourself. You move through the world, but you are not really present. You are lost in internal dialogues that drain your vital energy, that turn every moment of peace into a battlefield. Every achievement is immediately followed by a voice whispering, "This won't last," or "You don't deserve this." You feel like you are living in a state of constant alert, as if something terrible is always about to happen. And when nothing bad happens, your mind creates scenarios, invents problems, finds reasons to suffer. It's as if you have an internal alarm system that never turns off. And perhaps most painful of all, you feel alone in this experience. You look around and it seems like everyone else can just live, while you're stuck in a mental prison you've built with your own thoughts. You ask yourself, why can't I just be happy? Why do I sabotage myself? Why am I my own worst enemy? But let me tell you something fundamental that will start to change everything for you. This is not drama. This is not weakness. This is not all in your head, in the pejorative sense that people use, and it is definitely not something you can solve simply by thinking positively or focusing on the present. This is a profound reality of the human condition, a force that has been identified and studied by one of the most brilliant minds in the history of psychology. A force that explains why millions of people struggle with themselves in ways they can't even fully understand. It's not just generalized anxiety. It's not just clinical depression. It's not just low self-esteem or lack of self-confidence. It's something much deeper and more universal. It's something that lives in the most primitive layers of the human psyche, operating silently, influencing every decision you make. And here's what may sound contradictory, but is absolutely true. This force that seems to be destroying you is also an integral part of what keeps you functioning. It is a force that exists for an evolutionary reason, but in modern life, it manifests itself in ways that harm us. You don't need to fix yourself because you are not broken. You need to understand the forces that operate within you. And when you understand what is really happening, when you name what afflicts you, you gain the power to choose how to respond to it. There is a force operating within you at this very moment, a force that Freud discovered and that forever changed our understanding of the human mind, a force that explains why you sabotage yourself just when you are about to succeed, why you repeat destructive patterns even though you know they are bad for you, why your darkest thoughts seem to have a life of their own. For decades, Freud studied patients who presented with inexplicable symptoms, people who apparently chose suffering over healing, who repeated self-destructive behaviors, who seemed to have an unconscious need to fail, to hurt themselves, to always return to the same place of pain. Initially, Freud thought that all human beings were driven by what he called the pleasure principle, the pursuit of satisfaction and avoidance of pain. But the data didn't add up. There was something deeper going on, something that went against the logic of self-preservation. It was then that he made a discovery that would change everything. He discovered that there is an equally powerful force operating in the opposite direction, a force he called the death drive, thanatos. And understanding this force is the key to understanding why you feel trapped by your own thoughts. The death drive is not a conscious desire to die. This is crucial to understand. It is not suicide. It is something much more subtle, much more pervasive, and in some ways, much more dangerous, because it operates completely outside your consciousness. Thanatos is an unconscious tendency that pulls us toward dissolution, toward repeating destructive patterns, toward returning to a state of no tension. It is a force that prefers the familiar agony of repetition to the frightening uncertainty of growth. Think of it this way. Imagine that within you there are two fundamental currents. One, which Freud called eros, the life drive, pushes you forward toward growth, toward expansion, toward connection with other human beings. It is the force that makes you want to learn, love, create, challenge yourself. The other current, thanatos, pulls you backward toward repetition, toward familiar patterns, toward the dissolution of the tensions that come with growth. It is the force that makes you want to return to what is familiar, even when the familiar is destructive. Here's what's crucial. Both forces are necessary. Eros without thanatos would be uncontrolled growth, mania, boundless expansion. Thanatos without eros would be literal death. The problem arises when thanatos becomes dominant, when the regressive force overcomes the progressive force. And in modern life, with all its complexity, uncertainty, and constant demands for adaptation, thanatos often becomes the dominant force. Your mind, overwhelmed by the demands of growth, begins to seek relief in the familiar, the known, the repetitive, even when that means suffering. In modern life, this force manifests itself in ways that Freud could not have imagined. You scroll endlessly through social media, consuming content that makes you feel worse about yourself. This is not conscious masochism. It is thanatos at work. It is your mind seeking a state of non-tension through dissolution into the mass of information. You stay in relationships that drain your energy, that make you feel small, that reproduce familiar patterns of pain. Why? Because the familiar, even when painful, requires less psychic energy than the new and unknown. You choose jobs that slowly kill you inside, that don't challenge you, that don't make you grow. You say it's for stability, but in reality, it's thanatos preferring slow and familiar death to the energetic risk of growth. You say you want to change, but you always find an excuse to return to the same patterns. You start a diet and sabotage it on the third day. You start a project and abandon it when it's getting interesting. You meet someone special and pick a fight just when the connection is deepening. This is not laziness. It is not a lack of willpower. It is Thanatos whispering, why take the risk? Why expend energy? Why not go back to what you already know? It is your mind choosing the familiar agony of repetition over the frightening uncertainty of growth. And here's what's even more insidious. Thanatos disguises itself as prudence, realism, protection. The thoughts don't come as, I want to destroy myself. They come as, be realistic, don't delude yourself, better not to risk it. You've tried before and it didn't work. Thanatos manifests itself in the procrastination that keeps you stuck in cycles of guilt and self-judgment, in the perfectionism that prevents you from getting started because it's not good enough, in the self-sabotage that appears just when you are about to break a limiting pattern. Inside you, every moment, every breath, there is a silent battle, a battle that defines who you are, how you relate to the world, and what kind of life you will live. This battle is so fundamental that it literally determines whether you will thrive or wither away. On one side is Eros, your life force, your capacity to love not only others, but life itself. It is the force that makes you want to explore, experiment, grow. It is what makes you feel curiosity, passion, hope. It is the force that connects you with other human beings in an authentic and vulnerable way. Eros is the force that makes you wake up wanting to create something new, to learn something you didn't know, to connect with someone in a deeper way. It is the force that makes you believe that it's worth trying, that it is worth taking risks, that it is worth being vulnerable. On the other hand, Thanatos, not an enemy, but an equally fundamental force. It is the force that allows you to rest, that allows you to say no when necessary, that protects you from unnecessary risks. In its healthy aspect, Thanatos is the wisdom that prevents you from growing in an uncontrolled way. But when Thanatos becomes dominant, when it is unbalanced, it manifests itself in a destructive way. He convinces you that it's not worth trying. He whispers that you're not good enough. He makes you prefer the familiar agony of repetition to the energetic risk of growth. When you're stuck in thoughts that paralyze you, Thanatos is winning that battle. When you choose familiar suffering over the uncertainty of growth, when you sabotage yourself just as you are about to break a limiting pattern, Thanatos is in charge. But here's what's crucial to understand. This is not a battle you can win through brute force. It's not a war you can win simply by deciding to be positive or focus only on the good. Trying to suppress Thanatos is like trying to suppress gravity. It is a fundamental force of existence. The point is not to eliminate Thanatos. That would be impossible and, in fact, dangerous. The point is to develop enough awareness to recognize when this force is operating and to consciously choose how to respond to it. It is learning to dance with both forces instead of being dominated by one of them. Let me give you some specific examples so you can recognize Thanatos operating in your own life. You know the feeling. You're making real progress in some area of your life, feeling genuinely good about yourself, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, a devastating thought pops into your head. You're deluding yourself. This won't last. You don't deserve to be happy. Remember the last time you thought things were going well? These thoughts don't come as malicious whispers. They come disguised as realism, protection, preparation for the inevitable. Or you're about to have an important conversation, maybe declaring your feelings to someone, asking for a promotion, setting a necessary boundary, and then your mind starts generating catastrophic scenarios. It's not legitimate intuition. It's Thanatos whispering that it's safer to stay where you are. Thanatos manifests itself when you are about to step out of your comfort zone and your mind produces a flood of what ifs. What if it goes wrong? What if you are rejected? What if you fail? What if they find out you are not as competent as they think? It manifests itself in the way you relate to your own success. You get a promotion and immediately think, they'll find out I don't deserve this. You receive a compliment and your mind automatically disqualifies it. They're just being polite. Thanatos appears in procrastination that isn't just laziness. It's the part of you that prefers the familiar agony of guilt for not doing something to the uncertainty of trying and possibly failing. It's safer to hate yourself for not trying than to take a chance and find out you might not be capable. It manifests in relationships when you pick a fight just as things are getting too real, too intimate, too vulnerable. Your mind creates drama because drama is familiar, it's known, it's safer than the terrifying and beautiful uncertainty of being truly seen by another human being. Thanatos manifests itself in the way you consume information. You know that certain news, certain types of content, certain people make you feel worse, but you keep consuming them. Why? Because the familiar state of agitation, anxiety, and negativity requires less psychic energy than the uncertainty of not knowing what is going on. And perhaps most subtly, Thanatos manifests itself in the way you relate to your own suffering. There is a part of you that has become so identified with your problems, your limitations, your traumas, that the idea of actually being well has become frightening. Who would you be without your familiar problems? So here is the complete picture of what we have discovered together: your destructive thoughts, your tendency to self-sabotage, your difficulty in sustaining progress. None of this is a personal flaw. It is not a sign of moral weakness. It is not evidence that you are fundamentally defective. These are manifestations of a fundamental force of the human psyche that Sigmund Freud identified over a century ago. A force that exists in all of us, that has an evolutionary function, but that in the complexity of modern life often manifests itself in ways that harm us. You are not broken. You are not defective. You are not weaker than other people. You are experiencing what it means to be human, carrying within you powerful forces that sometimes work against your best conscious interests. Thanatos, the death drive, is not your enemy. It is a natural force that, when understood and consciously integrated, can even serve as a teacher. It shows you where you are trying to grow too fast, where you need to rest, where you need healthy boundaries. The problem is not the existence of Thanatos within you. The problem is when this force operates without your awareness, when you become its unconscious instrument rather than its conscious observer. But there is a way. There is a way to relate to this force that involves neither fighting it nor being dominated by it. There is a third option that few people know about: conscious integration. The knowledge you have just acquired is literally the first step toward freedom. When you understand that there is a part of you that prefers the familiar agony of repetition to the uncertainty of growth, you can begin to make conscious choices. You can begin to recognize when Thanatos is at work. You can begin to hear its whispers, identify its strategies, understand its manifestations, and when you name what is happening, when you recognize the force at work, it loses a significant part of its power over you. It is possible to begin to break the cycles that have kept you trapped. It is possible to regain control of your attention. It is possible to transform your relationship with your own thoughts. It is possible to consciously choose which force you will feed in each moment. But let me be clear, this is not about becoming a perpetually positive person. This is not about never having difficult thoughts again. This is about becoming the conscious observer of the forces operating in you, rather than being their unconscious instrument. The first step, and perhaps the most important, is not to force your mind to stop having destructive thoughts. The first step is to develop the ability to observe without judgment when these thoughts arise. It is learning to recognize, this is Thanatos at work. When you feel that familiar urge to give up just when you're making progress, pause, breathe, recognize. This is Thanatos preferring the familiar over growth. Don't fight the feeling, just see it for what it is. When you find yourself consuming content that makes you feel worse, scrolling endlessly, avoiding important tasks, don't judge yourself. Recognize, this is Thanatos seeking dissolution in repetition. This simple naming is already an act of awareness. When you name the force, when you recognize it, when you understand that it is operating, it loses some of its automatic power over you. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to hate yourself for its existence. You need to dance with it consciously. The second step is to begin consciously nurturing Eros, your life force. Every time you choose growth over repetition, every time you choose vulnerability over destructive familiarity, every time you choose to try over avoidance, you are strengthening your life force. This can be as simple as choosing to read a book instead of endless scrolling, as simple as having a difficult conversation instead of avoiding it, as simple as starting a small project instead of procrastinating. Every conscious choice is a victory for Eros over Thanatos. The third step is to understand that this is a practice, not a cure. Thanatos will not disappear because you understand its nature, but your relationship with this force can be completely transformed. You can go from being its unconscious victim to being its conscious observer. And here's something beautiful. When you stop fighting Thanatos and start understanding it, when you stop hating yourself for having destructive thoughts and start seeing them as information, you release a huge amount of energy that was being wasted on internal warfare. This released energy can be used to create, to connect, to grow, to live the life you really want to live. Not a life without shadows, but a life where you are the conscious director, not the unconscious actor. Now, I need to hear from you. I need to know how this information resonates in your life. What was the moment in this video where you recognized yourself most deeply? What specific pattern can you now identify as a manifestation of Thanatos in your life? Maybe it was when I talked about sabotaging yourself just when things are going well. Maybe it was about consuming content that makes you feel worse. Maybe it was about preferring the familiar agony of repetition to the uncertainty of growth. What part touched you the most? And more importantly, what are you going to do with this information? How are you going to apply this knowledge in your practical life? What small choice can you make today to start feeding Eros instead of Thanatos? Leave your comment below. Be specific. Be real. Be vulnerable. Because when you share your experience, when you name your struggle, you not only free yourself, you help others free themselves too. Let's create a space where you know you're not alone on this journey. Your words may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Your courage to recognize yourself can give someone else the courage to recognize themselves too. And if this video touched something deep within you, if it helped you understand something fundamental about your own nature, if it gave you a new perspective on your inner struggle, then subscribe to this channel. Because what we did today was just the beginning. We are only scratching the surface of understanding the human psyche. In the next videos, we will explore how to integrate these forces in a practical way, how to develop the awareness necessary to make conscious choices, how to transform your relationship with suffering. We will talk about how to deal with anxiety when you understand that it is often thanatos, manifesting as fear of growth. We will explore how depression can be, in part, thanatos, completely dominating eros, and what to do when that happens. We will discuss how relationships are battlefields where eros and thanatos manifest themselves, and how you can consciously choose which force to feed in your connections with other people. Because understanding yourself is not a luxury for people who have free time. It is an urgent necessity for anyone who wants to live an authentic, conscious, and genuinely satisfying life. And the more you understand the forces operating within you, the freer you become to consciously choose who you want to be. The freer you become to create the life you truly desire, not the life Thanatos convinces you is all you deserve. Before you go, I want you to do something for me. I want you to pause this video for a moment and just breathe. Breathe and recognize that you have just taken an important step toward self-knowledge. You are no longer the same person who started watching this video. You now have a name for something that may have tormented you namelessly for years. You have a framework for understanding patterns that once seemed mysterious and inevitable. And that's no small thing. It's revolutionary. This is the kind of knowledge that can change the trajectory of a life when applied consciously. But remember, knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. What are you going to do with what you've learned? What small choice can you make today to begin integrating this understanding into your life? It can be as simple as observing your thoughts for 5 minutes without judging them. It could be choosing to go for a walk instead of endless scrolling. It could be having a conversation you've been avoiding. It could be starting something small that you've been putting off. Any conscious choice is a victory. Any moment of awareness is a step toward freedom. Every time you recognize Thanatos operating without judging yourself for it, you are exercising your ability to be the conscious observer of your own experience. And that's what I want for you, not a life without shadows. That would be impossible and, frankly, not a complete life. I want for you a life where you are the conscious director of your own experience, not the unconscious actor of forces you don't understand. I want for you a life where you can dance with your shadows instead of being danced by them, where you can recognize Thanatos, honor him for his function, but consciously choose when and how to feed him. Until the next video. And remember, you are not broken. You are not defective. You are deeply, completely, beautifully human, and that is not only enough, it is extraordinary. Because being human means carrying within oneself powerful, contradictory, sometimes destructive forces. But it also means having the unique ability to become aware of these forces and choose how to dance with them. And this ability to make conscious choices, this ability to become the observer of one's own experience, is perhaps the closest thing to magic that exists in this world. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for having the courage to look within, to question, to seek understanding. The world needs more people willing to do this inner work. And don't forget, in the comments below, share your deepest insight. Let's build a community of people brave enough to look at their own shadows and wise enough to understand that the shadow, when recognized, can become an ally. Until next time, and remember, the journey of self-knowledge never ends, but each conscious step makes everything clearer, freer, more authentic.